The mahogany conference table felt cold beneath my trembling fingers as my brother Austin slid a single sheet of paper across its polished surface. His smirk so wide it practically split his face in half. My name is Natalie, I'm 28 years old and I work as a pediatric nurse in Chicago. But today I sat in a lawyer's office watching my own flesh and blood try to steal everything our parents had left behind. Austin leaned back in his leather chair, adjusting his expensive watch while his attorney, a sharp-faced man named Mr. Garrison, cleared his throat and began explaining why I deserved absolutely nothing from our father's estate. Miss Caldwell, as you're aware, you were adopted into the Bennett family at age 4, Garrison said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. The estate planning documents clearly indicate that biological heirs receive priority in asset distribution. I felt my stomach drop as Austin's grin widened even further, his eyes gleaming with a greed so naked it made me feel physically sick. Before we dive into how this meeting ended with Austin literally running from the room, please support our channel by liking this video and subscribing right now. I also want to hear from you, so leave your name and city in the comments while typing the word present, because I love knowing where my global audience is listening from. The hatred in Austin's eyes had been building for exactly 3 weeks, ever since the day our father passed away from a sudden heart attack at age 72. Dad had been a successful commercial real estate developer who built his fortune from nothing, starting with a single apartment building in the 1980s and eventually owning properties across 5 states. He was also the kindest man I'd ever known, the one who chose me from a crowded foster home and gave me a life I never dreamed possible. But Austin had always resented me, always saw me as an intruder who stole half of his inheritance just by existing. During Dad's funeral, Austin didn't shed a single tear, instead spending the entire reception on his phone, texting with lawyers and accountants about how to maximize his cut of the estate. I watched him from across the room, my heart breaking as I realized my own brother was already calculating how to erase me from our family's legacy before Dad's body was even cold. The day after the funeral, Austin showed up at my apartment unannounced, barging through my front door without even knocking. He paced around my small living room like a caged animal, his expensive suit looking completely out of place among my second-hand furniture and thrift store decorations. "Listen, Natalie, we need to talk about the estate," he said, not even bothering with basic pleasantries or asking how I was holding up. I was still in my pajamas, exhausted from crying all night, but Austin didn't seem to notice or care about my grief. He pulled out his phone and started showing me spreadsheets, property values, and investment portfolios, talking a mile a minute about liquidity issues and tax implications. "The problem is that Dad's assets are tied up in complicated trusts and business entities," Austin explained, his voice taking on a patronizing tone like he was talking to a child. "If we split everything 50-50 like Dad's outdated will suggests, we'll both get destroyed by taxes and lose millions in value." I stared at him in disbelief, barely able to process what he was saying through the fog of my grief. "Austin, Dad just died 3 days ago," I said quietly, my voice cracking. "Can't this wait a few weeks?" His face hardened instantly, all pretense of brotherly concern vanishing like smoke. "No, it can't wait because every day we delay costs us money," he snapped. "Look, I know you're sad or whatever, but Dad built this empire for me to inherit and continue, not for you to get half just because he felt sorry for some orphan." The words hit me like a physical slap, stealing the breath from my lungs. I felt tears spring to my eyes, but Austin just kept talking, oblivious to the pain he was causing. "You're a nurse, Natalie. You make what, $60,000 a year? You don't understand business, you don't understand investments, and you definitely don't understand how to manage a real estate portfolio worth $40 million. He sat down on my couch uninvited, spreading out more papers across my coffee table. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to buy out your share of the estate for a fair price. You're going to walk away with enough money to be comfortable, and we can both move on with our lives." I wiped my eyes and looked at the papers he'd brought, my vision still blurry from tears. The offer was for $2 million, which sounded like an enormous amount of money to someone who lived paycheck to paycheck. But even in my grief-stricken state, I knew the math didn't add up. "You just said the estate is worth $40 million, I said slowly, my brain struggling to work through the fog. "Half of that would be $20 million, not 2. Austin's jaw clenched and I saw a flash of anger cross his face before he forced it back down. "That's the gross value, not the net value after taxes, debts and legal fees," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. Trust me, after everything is settled, 2 million is actually generous. Something in his tone made my skin crawl, some quality of dishonesty that I'd never heard from him before. Despite our rocky relationship, Austin had never outright lied to me, but at that moment I knew with absolute certainty that he was trying to cheat me. I need to think about this, I said, gathering up his papers and handing them back. I'm not signing anything right now. His face turned red, veins bulging in his neck as he stood up abruptly. You're making a huge mistake, Natalie, he hissed, snatching the papers from my hands. Dad may have felt sorry for you, but that doesn't mean you deserve to destroy everything he built just because you're too stupid to accept a good deal. He stormed toward my door, then turned back one last time, his expression cold and calculating. You have 1 week to accept my offer. After that, I'm taking this to court, and I promise you, no judge is going to give full inheritance rights to an adopted kid over a biological son. The door slammed so hard it rattled the pictures on my wall, leaving me standing alone in my apartment, shaking with a mixture of grief, anger, and fear. I spent the next 3 days barely functioning, calling in sick to work and lying in bed, unable to eat or sleep properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Austin's hateful face and heard his cruel words echoing in my mind. No judge is going to give full inheritance rights to an adopted kid over a biological son. The phrase played on repeat, feeding every insecurity I'd ever had about being adopted, about not really belonging, about being less than. On the 4th day, I forced myself to get out of bed and start going through my father's personal effects, boxes of documents and photographs that had been delivered to my apartment from his house. I sat on my living room floor surrounded by decades of paperwork, financial statements, legal documents, and old family photos. There were pictures of me as a little girl, smiling gap-toothed in Dad's arms on my first day in their home. Photos of birthday parties, school plays, graduations, all the moments Dad had been there for me when my biological parents had abandoned me to the foster system. As I sorted through the boxes, I found a letter addressed to me in my father's handwriting, sealed in an envelope marked, "To be opened by Natalie only in the event of my death." My hands shook as I tore it open, and tears blurred my vision as I read his words. My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to protect you from what comes next. I know Austin has probably already approached you about the estate, and I know he's probably trying to cheat you out of your rightful inheritance. I'm writing this to tell you something I should have told you years ago, something I kept secret because I thought it would protect you from exactly this kind of greed and manipulation. I wiped my eyes and kept reading, my heart pounding. When I adopted you at age 4, I didn't just become your father in spirit. I also became your father-in-law and in finance. I established a separate trust fund for you that day, independent of my main estate, precisely because I worried that Austin would one day try to use your adopted status against you. The letter went on to explain that my father had been contributing to this secret trust fund for 24 years, carefully investing in stocks, bonds, and real estate properties that were completely separate from his main business holdings. The trust is managed by my oldest friend and attorney, Harold Pennington, who works at Pennington and Associates downtown. He has strict instructions to contact you after my death and explain everything, but if Austin gets to you first, you need to go to Harold immediately and ask about the Natalie Trust. Do not sign anything Austin gives you. Do not accept any offers or deals. Just go to Harold and he will explain everything. The letter was dated 5 years ago, updated and notarized with Harold Pennington's business card stapled to the bottom. I sat there on my floor, surrounded by boxes and tears streaming down my face, but for the first time since Dad died, I felt something other than grief. I felt hope, and beneath that hope, a cold, burning anger at my brother for trying to steal from me. The next morning, I called Pennington and Associates and made an emergency appointment, claiming it was an urgent estate business related to my father's death. The receptionist put me through immediately, and Harold Pennington's warm, grandfatherly voice came through the phone. "Natalie Bennett, I've been waiting for your call," he said gently. "Your father made me promise to protect you, and I intend to keep that promise. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" I took a personal day from the hospital and showed up at his downtown law office at exactly 2 o'clock, my father's letter clutched in my sweaty hands. Harold was in his 70s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake, and he welcomed me into his office like I was family. "Your father was my best friend for 40 years, he said, gesturing for me to sit in a comfortable leather chair. He loved you more than anything in this world, Natalie, and he saw Austin's greed growing for years. That's why he created the trust. Harold pulled out a thick folder and began explaining the details in terms I could actually understand. When my father adopted me, he'd started putting money into a trust fund that would mature when I turned 25 or upon his death, whichever came first. Over 24 years, he'd contributed almost $5 million to this trust, which had been carefully invested in blue-chip stocks, real estate properties and conservative bonds. The current value of the Natalie Trust is approximately $4.2 million, Harold said, sliding a portfolio summary across his desk. This money is entirely separate from your father's main estate, which means Austin has absolutely no claim to it whatsoever. I stared at the numbers on the page, unable to fully process what I was seeing. $4.2 million. Money that was mine alone, completely independent of whatever Austin tried to do with Dad's business holdings. But that's not all, Harold continued, his eyes twinkling slightly. Your father also made you a 50% beneficiary of his main estate, which is worth approximately $43 million after all debts and taxes. Austin is the other 50% beneficiary, which means you're each entitled to roughly $21.5 million from the primary estate. The room seemed to spin as the full picture became clear. Between my private trust fund and my half of the main estate, I was looking at an inheritance of approximately $25.7 million. Austin knew about the main estate split, which is why he was trying to buy me out for $2 million, but he had absolutely no idea about my private trust fund. Your father specifically instructed me not to reveal the existence of the Natalie Trust until after his death, Harold explained. He wanted Austin to show his true colors first, to prove whether he would treat you fairly or try to cheat you. Based on your presence here today, I'm guessing Austin has already made his move. I told Harold everything. About Austin's visit to my apartment, the $2 million buyout offer, the cruel things he'd said about me being adopted and not deserving a full inheritance. Harold's expression grew darker with each detail, his jaw clenching in barely controlled anger. That boy is just like his mother was, he muttered, more to himself than to me. Your father divorced her because of her greed, and Austin inherited every ounce of it. He pulled out more documents, including copies of the official estate planning documents that Austin's lawyer had somehow misinterpreted during our upcoming meeting. Austin's attorney, this Garrison fellow, is either incompetent or complicit in trying to defraud you, Harold said firmly. The estate documents are crystal clear. Biological versus adopted status is completely irrelevant under your father's will. You are entitled to exactly 50%, no more, no less. We spent the next 2 hours going over every detail of the estate, the trust fund, and the legal strategy for the upcoming inheritance meeting. Harold would attend with me as my personal attorney, and we would let Austin and his lawyer make their case first before revealing the truth. I want you to let them talk, Harold instructed. Let Austin show exactly how low he's willing to go. Let him make his arguments about why you deserve nothing. And then when they think they've won, we'll show them the real documents. The plan was perfect, cold and calculated, designed to give Austin just enough rope to hang himself with his own greed. I left Harold's office that afternoon feeling like a completely different person, armed with knowledge and legal firepower that my brother couldn't possibly anticipate. The week passed in agonizing slowness as I waited for the inheritance meeting, scheduled for the following Monday morning at Garrison's law office. Austin called me twice, leaving increasingly aggressive voicemails demanding I accept his buyout offer before things get ugly in court. I didn't respond to either message, letting him stew in uncertainty and frustration. On Sunday night, I barely slept, my mind racing with anticipation and a dark, thrilling sense of approaching justice. I'd spent my entire life feeling like the lesser sibling, the adopted one, the one who didn't quite belong. And now I was about to watch Austin's world crumble when he realized just how badly he'd underestimated me. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, with storm clouds gathering over Chicago's skyline like an omen. I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, a simple black dress and blazer that made me look capable and serious. Harold picked me up at my apartment at 8:30, driving us both to Garrison's downtown office in his vintage Mercedes. Remember, he said as we rode the elevator up to the 15th floor, let them make their case first. No matter what Austin says, no matter how much it hurts, stay calm and let him finish. I nodded, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The elevator doors opened and we walked down a long hallway lined with expensive art and dark wood paneling, finally reaching Garrison's corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Austin was already there, sitting at the mahogany conference table with Garrison, both of them looking confident and relaxed. Austin's eyes widened slightly when he saw Harold walk in behind me, his expression shifting from surprise to suspicion. "Harold Pennington," he said slowly, standing up to shake hands. "I didn't realize Natalie had retained counsel." Harold smiled pleasantly, but I could see the steel beneath his grandfatherly demeanor. "Miss Bennett felt it was appropriate to have legal representation at such an important meeting," he said smoothly. "I hope that's not a problem." Garrison exchanged a quick glance with Austin, some unspoken communication passing between them, then gestured for us all to sit. "Of course not, the more legal minds the better," Garrison said, though his tone suggested he was less than thrilled. That's when Austin slid the paper across the table, the one claiming I deserved nothing because I was adopted, and Garrison began his carefully rehearsed speech about biological heirs and estate priority. I sat there listening, my face carefully neutral as they laid out their entire fraudulent case. According to them, my father's will had been ambiguously worded regarding adopted children, and Illinois inheritance law favored biological descendants in cases of unclear intent. Furthermore, Garrison continued, pulling out more documents, there are substantial debts and tax liabilities that need to be resolved before any distribution can occur. Mr. Bennett's estate owes approximately $8 million in various obligations, which significantly reduces the net value available for distribution. I watched Austin's face as Garrison talked, seeing the barely concealed excitement in his eyes. He thought he was winning. He thought I was about to walk away with nothing or at best, accept his insulting $2 million offer out of desperation. So, in light of these complexities, Garrison concluded, Mr. Bennett has graciously offered to simplify matters by purchasing Miss Caldwell's contested inheritance share for the sum of $2 million, payable immediately upon signing. He slid another document across the table, a release form that would sign away all my rights to Dad's estate in exchange for Austin's lowball offer. The room fell silent, everyone looking at me waiting for my response. I let the moment stretch, enjoying the tension, then slowly turned to look at Harold. "Mr. Pennington, do you have anything to add?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Harold opened his briefcase with deliberate slowness, pulling out a thick stack of documents and setting them on the table with a heavy thud that made both Austin and Garrison flinch. "Oh yes, quite a bit actually," Harold said, his pleasant tone evaporating into something much colder. "Let's start with the blatant misrepresentation of Illinois inheritance law. Mr. Garrison, are you aware that the state of Illinois makes absolutely no legal distinction between biological and adopted children for the purposes of inheritance?" Garrison's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Well, in cases of ambiguous wording," he started, but Harold cut him off sharply. "There is no ambiguous wording in Andrew Bennett's will," Harold snapped, pulling out a certified copy and slamming it on the table. Page 3, Section 7, Subsection A, quote, "I leave 50% of my entire estate, including all properties, assets, investments and holdings, to my daughter Natalie Marie Bennett and 50% to my son Austin James Bennett, to be divided equally without preference or priority." End quote. The silence in the room was deafening. Austin's confident smirk had completely disappeared, replaced by growing confusion and the first flickers of panic. The will explicitly uses the word daughter for Natalie and son for Austin with no qualifiers, no distinctions and absolutely no mention of biological versus adopted status. Harold continued, his voice rising slightly. "Any first-year law student could tell you this language is crystal clear and legally unambiguous." Garrison was frantically flipping through his own copy of the will, his face growing redder by the second. "But the debts, the tax liabilities," he stammered, grasping at straws. "Oh, you mean the $8 million in debts that don't actually exist?" Harold said, pulling out more documents. "I have here the complete accounting of Andrew Bennett's estate, prepared by Wilson and Associates, the most reputable forensic accountants in Chicago. The total legitimate debts and tax liabilities amount to approximately $1.3 million, not $8 million. Austin stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. That's impossible, I have documentation, he started, but Harold cut him off with a look of pure contempt. You have fabricated invoices and fraudulent debt claims that you and Mr. Garrison created in an attempt to steal your sister's inheritance, Harold said flatly. Would you like me to go through them one by one and explain exactly how I know they're fake? The color drained from Austin's face as he realized how thoroughly he'd been caught. Garrison looked like he was about to be sick, loosening his tie and taking a large gulp of water. But that's not even the interesting part, Harold continued, and I saw a small smile play at the corners of his mouth. The really fascinating part is what Austin doesn't know about. I watched my brother's face as Harold pulled out the trust fund documents, saw the exact moment comprehension dawned and his world began to collapse. 24 years ago, when Andrew Bennett adopted Natalie, he established a private trust fund specifically for her benefit, Harold explained, sliding the documents across the table so Austin could see them. He contributed to this trust regularly, investing carefully and conservatively, until it reached its current value of $4.2 million. This trust is completely separate from the main estate, which means Austin has absolutely zero claim to it. Austin grabbed the documents with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the numbers, his mouth hanging open in shock. $4 million, he whispered, his voice cracking. Dad gave her $4 million in a secret trust fund? $4.2 million, I corrected quietly, speaking for the first time since Harold had started his presentation. And yes, it was a secret because Dad knew exactly what kind of person you were, Austin. He knew you'd try to cheat me, so he protected me. My brother looked up at me, his face a mixture of shock, anger, and something that might have been shame. So let's do the actual math, Harold said, pulling out a calculator and writing numbers on a legal pad. The estate is worth approximately $43 million after legitimate debts and taxes. 50% to each sibling equals $21.5 million for Austin, and $21.5 million for Natalie. Plus Natalie's private trust of $4.2 million, which brings her total inheritance to approximately $25.7 million. He looked up at Austin with an expression of withering disdain. You attempted to defraud your sister out of $23.7 million, Mr. Bennett. That's not just greed, that's criminal fraud. The room erupted into chaos. Austin started yelling, claiming he didn't know about the trust fund, that this wasn't fair, that Dad had always favored me. Garrison tried to defend himself, insisting he'd only worked with the information Austin had provided, throwing my brother under the bus to save his own license. I sat there calmly watching it all unfold, feeling a cold sense of satisfaction settle over me like a blanket. Harold let them rant for about 30 seconds, then pulled out one final document and slammed it on the table hard enough to make everyone jump. That's enough, he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. This is a formal complaint I'm filing with the Illinois State Bar Association regarding Mr. Garrison's conduct in this matter, including allegations of fraud, misrepresentation, and conspiracy to deprive an heir of her legal inheritance. Garrison went white as a sheet, all his bluster evaporating instantly. Mr. Pennington, please, I was simply following my client's instructions, he pleaded, but Harold held up a hand. Save it for the ethics committee, he said coldly. As for you, Mr. Bennett, he turned to Austin, you have two options. Option 1. Accept the 50-50 split as outlined in your father's will, cooperate fully with the estate administration, and hope that Natalie doesn't decide to press criminal charges for attempted fraud. Option 2. We go to court where I will not only ensure you get exactly 50% and not a penny more, but I will also pursue criminal prosecution for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Austin collapsed back into his chair, his face buried in his hands. All the arrogance, all the confidence, all the cruel superiority had been stripped away, leaving him looking small and defeated. There's also option 3, I said quietly, and everyone turned to look at me. You can get nothing at all. Austin's head snapped up, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. What are you talking about? He asked hoarsely. I pulled out my own copy of Dad's will, turning to a page I'd memorized over the past week. Page 17, Section 14, the No Contest Clause, I said, reading aloud. Quote, if any beneficiary contests this will or attempts to challenge its provisions through fraud, coercion, or misrepresentation, said beneficiary shall forfeit their entire inheritance, which shall instead be distributed to the remaining beneficiaries. End quote. The realization hit Austin like a truck. His face went from white to gray, his hands trembling so badly he had to grip the edge of the table for support. You tried to defraud me using fabricated debts and false legal claims, I continued, my voice steady and cold. That's textbook fraud and misrepresentation. Which means, according to Dad's will, you've forfeited your entire inheritance. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that conference room. Natalie, please, Austin whispered, tears actually forming in his eyes. Please, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I was greedy, but please don't take everything. I looked at my brother, this man who had called me an orphan, who had tried to steal $23 million from me, who had never once treated me like a real family. Part of me wanted to invoke the no contest clause right then and there, to watch him lose everything as punishment for his cruelty. But another part of me, the part that Dad had raised to be better than the cruelty I'd experienced, knew what I had to do. I'm not going to take your inheritance, Austin, I said finally, watching relief flood his face. But not because you deserve mercy. Because Dad wouldn't have wanted me to. Despite everything, he loved you and he wanted you to have your share. I leaned forward, making sure he was looking directly into my eyes. But we're done. After this estate is settled, after you get your $21 million, I never want to see you again. No calls, no emails, no showing up at my apartment. We split the money exactly as Dad intended, and then we went our separate ways forever. Austin nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face. Yes, okay, whatever you want, Natalie. I'm so sorry, I held up a hand, cutting him off. Save it. Your apology means nothing to me. Sign the proper estate documents, take your money and get out of my life. Harold pulled out the legitimate estate settlement papers, the ones that outlined the proper 50-50 split with no fraud or manipulation. Austin signed them with shaking hands, his expensive pen leaving smudged ink where his tears had fallen on the pages. Garrison signed as a witness, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The whole process took maybe 10 minutes and then it was done. The estate would be properly divided, I would receive my full inheritance plus my trust fund, and Austin would get exactly what Dad had intended. Nothing more, nothing less. Harold gathered up all the documents, placing them carefully back in his briefcase. I'll file these with the probate court this afternoon, he said. Barring any complications, the estate should be fully settled within 90 days. He stood up, offering me his arm. Shall we go, Miss Bennett? I stood up, taking one last look at my brother sitting there at the conference table, his head in his hands, his perfect plan in ruins around him. I felt nothing for him, no anger, no pity, no love. Just a cold, empty distance, like looking at a stranger who'd once tried to hurt me and failed. Harold and I walked out of that office together, leaving Austin and his disgraced lawyer behind in the wreckage of their own greed. The elevator ride down felt surreal, 15 floors of silence broken only by the soft ding of each passing level. When we finally stepped out into the lobby, Harold turned to me with a gentle smile. Your father would be very proud of you, he said softly. You showed strength and mercy in equal measure. That's rare. I smiled back, feeling the weight of the past week finally lifting from my shoulders. Thank you, Harold. For everything. For protecting me, for being Dad's friend, for being mine. We stepped out into the Chicago morning, the storm clouds from earlier beginning to break apart, letting shafts of sunlight through onto the wet streets. I pulled out my phone and saw 17 missed calls from Austin, all from the past 10 minutes. I blocked his number without listening to a single voicemail, watching his name disappear from my contacts list. Harold offered to drive me home, but I declined, wanting to walk for a while and clear my head. I wandered through downtown Chicago, past the familiar landmarks and busy intersections, thinking about everything that had happened. Dad had protected me one final time, even from beyond the grave, setting up safeguards and trust funds because he knew his own son couldn't be trusted. The thought made me sad but also grateful beyond measure. 3 months later, the estate was fully settled. I received my $21.5 million from the main estate, plus my $4.2 million trust fund, exactly as Harold had calculated. Austin received his $21.5 million and immediately moved to California, buying a mansion in Beverly Hills and posting about it constantly on social media. I unfollowed him within a day, keeping my promise to cut him out of my life completely. With my inheritance, I did something Dad would have loved. I established a foundation for foster children, providing scholarships, housing assistance, and support services for kids aging out of the system. I donated $5 million to start it, setting up an endowment that would fund programs for decades to come. I also bought a beautiful house in Evanston, nothing too flashy, just a comfortable home with a garden where I could finally breathe. I kept working at the hospital too because nursing wasn't just a job to me, it was who I was. My coworkers never knew about my inheritance and I liked it that way. I didn't need the attention or the judgment that came with sudden wealth. I just wanted to live my life helping people, honoring Dad's memory by being the kind of person he'd raised me to be. Sometimes late at night I think about that day in the conference room, the look on Austin's face when he realized how badly he'd miscalculated. Part of me wishes I'd invoked the no contest clause, taken everything and left him with nothing. But then I remember Dad's letter, his words about protection and love, and I know I made the right choice. Austin's greed cost him a sister, a family, and any shred of moral integrity he might have had left. My mercy cost me nothing and gained me peace. I never heard from Austin again after that day, except for one email 6 months later. It was short, just 3 sentences. I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve it. But thank you for not destroying me when you had the chance. I never responded. Some bridges once burned should stay ashes. If this story of justice and quiet revenge resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Natalie's position. Would you have shown mercy like she did or invoked that no contest clause? Type your answer below along with your name and city. I read every single comment. Thanks for listening, and remember, family is about love and respect, not blood. See you in the next story.